Hello, hello, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to another episode of the Daily Friend Show. I'm your host, Nicholas Lorimer, and today I'm joined by that Lion of the East Rand, Mr. Marius Roodt. Marius, how are you today?
How's Nick? Doing quite well today, thank you.
Very good. And joining us for, I'm not sure if it's the first time or the second time on the show, but it's definitely the first time on YouTube, our sort of tech wizard man, Alex Weiss, who is in many ways the real brains of the operation here. Alex, how are you?
Well, thanks, Nick. It's a pleasure to be in front of the camera today with you guys.
Yes, it's very good to have you, sir. And of course, one of the reasons that we have you is because Herman is currently on holiday doing, I'm not quite sure what, I think he's looking at Impala or something. And Mr. Gabriel Krauser is still unfortunately ill with COVID, but he seems to be getting a bit better, but he's not having a good time. Anyway, let us get into the meat of today. And I guess we should start with, I'm kind of loath to talk about it just because it gives one a bad taste in one's mouth. And we kind of haven't talked about it this whole week. But of course, President Cyril Ramaphosa has been testifying before the Zondo Commission. And yesterday, it was summed up in a number of quotes. Basically, he said, I didn't see anything, didn't hear anything, and I didn't say anything, and I didn't do anything, and I was shocked, which is not very, that's very much in character for Cyril Ramaphosa. So let me just read some quotes. He was asked, how influential is the Cadre Deployment Committee in appointing comrades? So, of course, Cyril Ramaphosa was the chairperson of the Cadre Deployment Committee from, I think, 2013 until 2018. I stand under correction there. But anyway, he was asked this question and he said, the deployment committee knows that at best, all it can ever do is note that there is a vacancy and that there are certain names that could be proposed. Having done that, it knows very well that it is not a appointing structure. By definition, the way our constitution works, it could never have had the judge appointed. Leon Schreiber from the DA pointed out that the minutes of the ANC Cadre Deployment Committee meetings for the entire period that Cyril Ramaphosa was president, that Cyril Ramaphosa was head of it, have just vanished mysteriously. And so nothing that the president is saying in describing the meetings can be checked against text. He was asked, did he consider resigning after the learning of state capture? And he then he said that he went to Jessie Duarte and said to her that he would resign his position as deputy president of the republic. And he believes that that message was conveyed to the then president, but he said that ultimately he decided not to do it because, he had to be there to counter state capture from the inside. So he was secretly, being the man on the inside, holding back the Guptas. He was also asked if he knew about any links between former chairperson of ESCOM, Brian Molefe, and the Gupta family. And he said, quote, I had no inkling or knowledge or even suspicion that there is a linkage and connection. I noted that, and in time it became a real concern that somebody once held in high regard was entangled with a family that had captured the state. Marius, let me start with you. What do you make of what the president's testimony said? Am I being uncharitable in characterizing him as a weasel?
I think you could be harsher, actually. As you say, this was a man. He was he's been at the highest levels of our government since definitely since 2014 when he was the deputy president of the country. He's been deputy president of the ANC since 2012. He's been a member of the NEC since at least 2002. I'm not sure if it was before that, but I'm sure he was, seeing he was Secretary General of the ANC in the early 90s. I'm sure he would have still been an insider of the ANC even when he was out of government in the 90s and the 2000s and so on. So it is so disingenuous for him to claim he didn't know what was going on, and like you say, didn't hear anything, didn't say anything, didn't see anything. Anybody, it boggles the mind that he actually claims this stuff. And, he's taking the whole country for a bunch of fools. But I think this also tells you something. A lot of people saw Cyril Ramaphosa as sort of a savior of the country. He was the great hope to the rescue South Africa from the Zuma years and so on. But we must not forget, and this is a point lots of other people have made, I'm not the only person, Cyril Ramaphosa is part of the ANC. He's not separate from it. And the problem in South Africa is that we have an ANC problem. As long as the ANC governs in the way it does, and governs full stop, actually, we are going to carry on having the same problems. Zuma was a product of the ANC. The various corruption scams we have, these are all these are features of the ANC. They're not bugs. And I've said this before in relation to Zimbabwe. Zimbabwe never had a Robert Mugabe problem. They had a ZANU-PF problem. And ZANU-PF is still the governing party there, and that country still has the myriad of problems it's had for the past 20 years, 25 years. And the same, as I said, it's the same issues in South Africa. And it's clear that Cyril Ramaphosa has no interest in putting the country before the party. He's an ANC man before he's a member of the ANC before he's president of South Africa. And I think that tells you everything. And that, I mean, so many of South Africa's problems, you can link back to that fact.
No, definitely. Alex, you had some thoughts, which I'm not sure you can repeat verbatim, about Cyril Ramaphosa's performance yesterday, but what do you make of it?
As an honorary representative of the youth in this call, to use a phrase, he's wiling. No, he's talking nonsense. It's, one of the other quotes that the Times Live article mentions is his meeting with the Guptas, his first meeting after the Mangaung conference in 2012. And then it goes on to talk about, Eskom and, the landing of at Waterkloof Air Force Base. And, it's like, I had no idea. And, we spoke to the Guptas and told them what an unfortunate position it put the president in. And it's just so devoid of any morals. It's actually infuriating. And it just makes the whole idea of Ramaphosa seem absolutely ridiculous. But he's not. No one's believing him. If they are, I'm concerned for them, because he's just very much a part of the ANC. He's a devout socialist. He's made his money off on the back of BE deals, and that's how the ANC, greases its patronage network. And it's just really but it's infuriating because of all the ramifications that it has. And it's just the complete neglect of any sort of accountability. We know how bad, you guys discussed last week, how bad load shedding was last year. We know it caps in economic growth. The list is endless of how all his part in all these decisions really has set the country back.
Yeah, I mean, so there's this kind of funny game that defenders of Cyril Ramaphosa play, right? So let's take for a moment that everything he said was true here. He didn't know anything. He tried his best to do what he could from the inside and all that kind of thing. So let's be charitable and grant him all of that. At the same time, his defenders argue that he's a master strategist who is plotting behind the scenes to save the country. How can he both be the country's most oblivious person in the universe and a master strategist pulling the strings behind the scenes and controlling everything? Marius, am I missing something here?
I don't think so. It's like, as you said, it's very, what do you call it? Lots of cognitive dissonance going on. Like you say, either he's this poor guy, he's just this, hapless guy who somehow made it to the presidency of South Africa, doesn't have a clue how to do anything, but he's also actually this, genius politician who's pulling all the strings and so on. And it actually reminds me, just thinking about Cyril Ramaphosa saying that he didn't know what was going on, reminds me of a quote that happened during the TRC hearings during the 90s. And it was F.W. de Klerk who said he didn't know anything about the death squads going on during apartheid and so on. And, he didn't know that there were things like Vlakplaas and Kufut and all these things killing dissidents and anti-apartheid activists. And I can't remember who the person was, but they said if de Klerk, de Klerk, if he says that, he's either a fool or he's lying. And so I think that's where it comes to. There's only two explanations here. Either Cyril Ramaphosa does not know what's going on, then he shouldn't be the president of the country, or he's lying. And I don't think Cyril Ramaphosa is a stupid man. South Africa's a complicated country. The ANC's, lots of backstabbers, very greasy pole to get to the top of it. You also have to, you've got to play dirty and you've got to know how to play the game and so on. So I don't think Cyril Ramaphosa is a stupid man. So that leaves us one other option. And our listeners can decide for themselves what I mean.
Yeah. Anything final to add, Alex, before we move on?
No, I think it's just that he's a politician before he's a public servant. The one thing I just wish the public and a lot of commentators would just do is just take what he says and believe it. In terms of, if he says that, the party is more important than the country, take his word for it. I mean, obviously here we can tell, like you said, either he's lying or he's a fool, but yeah, he's a politician first and he seems to be playing that quite well.
Indeed he is. Right, let us move away from South Africa for a bit to talk a little bit about one of our northern, not quite neighbor, but fellow southern African countries, and that is Zambia, who today I believe is having a very fiercely contested presidential election. I'm going to really struggle with the pronunciations here, but the current president is Edgar Lungu, who is the incumbent, and he's running against his longtime rival Hakainde Hichilema, I think is his name, who's a businessman. And they are facing off at the polls for the third time. Last time, Hichilema almost won, almost defeated Lunga. But there were allegations of vote rigging, and there's been quite a lot of heavy-handedness. Although it looks like Hichilema has a better chance of winning more decisively this time. No one's been willing to call the results of the election yet because it's looking far too close to call. But Zambia has been through a very difficult time recently. They defaulted on their loans during 2020. And they're in a pretty bad state. Inflation has hit 24%, I think, 24.6% in June, which is the highest in more than a decade. And the economy is doing really badly. And a lot of Zambians are now saying we really need something to change because this is not so good. Marius, what do you make of it? Do you think the polls will be free and fair? How has President Lungu treated his opposition so far?
Yeah, it's if from what Zambia Watch has been saying, if the polls are free and fair, then Edgar Lungu will probably lose the election, but it's an open question whether they will be. In the last election, there were allegations of ballot stuffing and all this kind of thing, and people are worried that the same thing is going to happen in today's election. They're also worried that the internet's going to be cut off and so on. And also during campaigning, I would pronounce his competitor's name, or his opponent's name is Hichilema, but maybe it's Hichilema, but I'll stick to Hichilema.
I have no idea, Marius. I'm taking your lead here.
So Hakainde Hichilema claims that before this election, while he was campaigning, he was prevented from going to a lot of towns and so on. Soldiers would block roads and turn his motorcade around. Even when he was flying into places, the air traffic controllers wouldn't accept his flight plan and say, no, he's got to go back. And they've also been saying to him and other opposition figures that they can't campaign because of COVID and so on, even though these rules don't seem to count for the president. There've also been allegations that Edgar Lungu and his campaign have been using taxpayer money to pay for campaigning and pay to ferry themselves around the country using government helicopters and all this kind of thing. So it's all quite worrying. Also, Edgar Lungu, there was a charge of treason against Hakainde Hichilema in 2017 or 2018, I think, because there's a case of rival motorcades. So Hichilema's motorcade wouldn't give way to the president's motorcade. And Hichilema was then arrested. He should have actually only been charged with the traffic violation. Instead, he was charged with treason. And he was in prison for a couple of days where he was claimed he was actually in solitary confinement. Our listeners might remember that's when Musa Maimane, the erstwhile leader of the DA, wanted to go visit him. And he was turned away at the airport. Just to
clarify, he was charged with treason for holding up the president's motorcade.
Exactly. So, and apparently also when he went to go get arrested, the police ransacked Hichilema's house. They stole jewelry. They beat up the people who worked at his house, the various staff members. Shouldn't laugh, but apparently police defecated on his bed. So it wasn't a good time for Mr. Hichilema. So, but yeah, I think this is quite an important election for Zambia. And I think actually for the region. Zambia was always quite a there was also a one-party state for a long time between 1964 and 1991 when multi-party elections were first held, and was doing quite well. It seemed to have quite a vibrant democracy and so on. Then its economy started doing quite well. It moved away from statist policies where they'd nationalized the copper mines, which is their biggest export. They allowed private enterprise. The economy was growing strongly. There were very strongly contested elections. They had peaceful transfer of power between various political parties and people and so on. And then Edgar Lungu came to power in 2015, taking over from another member of his party, the Patriotic Front, a man called Michael Sato, who died in office. But Edgar Lungu then came to power, and since then, things have not been going well. There have been claims of democratic backsliding. The economy has been doing very poorly, as we said. But like I said, this is a concern for the region. In the 90s, Southern Africa was seen as a kind of beacon for the whole world. We'd seen the end of apartheid. Namibia became independent was democracy. We'd seen the end of civil wars in Angola and Mozambique. Zambia had ended. One-party state and become a democracy. But now we're seeing a lot of backsliding in the whole region. Mozambique is having problems. Got its insurgencies, also problems with democracy there. We know all about the problems here in South Africa. Namibia has big economic problems. Even Botswana has some problems with its democracy and also its economy, actually. It's not diversifying fast enough. When it runs out of diamonds, it's going to have big problems too. Angola's also got problems with corruption, and we all know about the problems in Zimbabwe. So this is a big test for the region in general, and it's something we definitely have to watch. And whoever wins in Zambia today, let's just hope it reflects the will of the Zambian people. And from what I've seen, the will of the Zambian people probably wants Mr. Chilema to be the president. But yeah, we'll have to wait and see what happens. But I think if Edgar Lungu gets another term for Zambia, it's not going to be good for the country, and then by implication, the broader region.
Yeah. So it's worth noting that today is just the first round of voting, and there's actually 16 candidates. And if no one gets 50%, they go to a second round. And it looks like no one's going to get 50%. So there will probably be another round. I think if someone does get 50%, it's very possibly because there was cheating. Anyway, Alex, I kind of was, when I was reading about this, I was struck by how this kind of feels like a dark version of what South Africa's future might look like in, 10, 15 years from now, when we're sort of gone through the difficulties of debt and severe economic contraction and trauma. And then we're sort of brought to the point where we have a crisis election to decide the future of the nation. Do you think that's a crazy thought? Am I being too pessimistic? What are your thoughts on this, Alex?
Well, I think there's certain things that we could wish to have from Zambia. Their unemployment rate is around 12.5%. And the one report I was reading had their devastating youth unemployment at 1 in 5. We would take a 1 in 5 youth unemployment any day. But the thing that stands out is democracy in Southern Africa I think generally on the African continent is a very delicate thing. And I think the one thing we do have, at least in South Africa, is not blatant intimidation of opposition. We've obviously got political killings within the ANC, particularly in KZN, which is frightening in its own right. But I think what sticks out to me here is, South Africans love to toot their own horn, but South African exceptionalism, I think, is as good as gone. There's a lot that resonates within this, but I think just one thing that is particularly interesting for the region is that in this vote, over 50% in Zambia, over 50% of the 8 million voters are under the age of 35. And as in South Africa, the majority are young, urban, middle class, and those are the people who are going to shape the future. So I think the space to watch in the next 5-10 years, I mean, we know the ramifications here with, our elections potentially being postponed this year. But it'll be interesting to see the ramifications of what role social media plays, the more internet access people have, more tech-savvy youth, and what that means for democracy and quite authoritarian governments generally in the region.
No, definitely. And yeah, I just want to echo also what Marius said about how I hope that it is a free and fair election, because it's always good. I think democracy and authoritarianism are both contagious, and when democracy is flourishing in one place, it tends to also flourish in others. So Zambia managing to safeguard their democracy and have a free and fair election, I think, will help South Africa. to do the same. Anyway, let us move on to, we're not going to spend long on this, but it's just something I thought had to be brought up because it was so mad. So Charlotte Maxeke Hospital has, of course, been in total chaos since a fire at the hospital. It's a major hospital in Johannesburg, and it's been closed throughout a big chunk of the COVID pandemic now, through the whole of the third wave in Gauteng. And parts of the hospital have sort of partially reopened, but for the most part, it's a complete disaster zone still, with most of the hospital closed. And matters have gotten worse. A case of theft has been opened at the Hillbrow police station after several appliances were stolen from Charlotte Maxeke Hospital. Now, you might think, oh, there's nothing particularly interesting about that. Things get stolen all the time in South Africa. This kind of stood out to me. Among the missing items were 10 desktop computers, 6 plasma television sets, 3 laptops, and 1 fridge. How do you get out the front door with a fridge? Marius, this has to have been an inside job, right?
Yeah, you'd think so. But I mean, I'm just thinking when you WhatsApped me the story earlier when we were discussing the show, and I replied to that meme of the guy just saying it's also tiresome, and it is. I mean, you can't act. You just have to nobody's shocked by this. It's like, well, obviously Charlie Maxeke was going to get robbed, and obviously a fridge was going to get stolen. But I also like to know, was it just a normal bar fridge where you keep your cold drinks in, or was it like a big medical fridge the way you keep vaccines and medicines and stuff in? What kind of fridge was it? And if it was a big medical fridge, what do people need with it? What are they going to do with it? Are they going to have I suppose it'd be a cool fridge in your home bar or something?
Marius, during the looting, I saw a clip where this lady had she had stolen 2 fridges, and they were both filled with Gouda cheese. So where there's a will, there's a way.
Yeah, exactly. But I mean, it also tells you
how much cheese can one person need?
You can never have too much cheese, but it's also, I mean, why is Charlotte Maxeke being robbed? I mean, is there any security there? When's it going to get up and running again? I mean, I'm not sure. I think it's the second biggest hospital in Joburg, which means it's probably close to being the second biggest hospital in Gauteng. I mean, and also we in this midst of the pandemic where the government claims, and we were in Gauteng was in a third wave not so long ago. Government was, they're claiming that it's doing everything to get ready, but then Charlotte Maxeke has been sitting empty for how long, and with the damage, and apart from the COVID, how many other procedures had to get delayed, and whatever, how many other people have had medical issues because they couldn't get treatment at Charlotte Maxeke and whatever. It's just, it's like I say, I mean, I've said this, I think I said this every time on the show now. I mean, you got to laugh because otherwise you're going to cry,
No, exactly. And of course, it's just, this is of course the same government that thinks that it can now take even greater control of the entire medical system through the national health insurance policy, which is still not dead, despite the fact that we're running out of money, that the hospitals have not been particularly, shining during all of this. Alex, anything to add before we move on?
Yeah, just briefly, I think yesterday I was chatting to some younger colleagues, all of us born either on or after 1995, and we were discussing why we need to get rid of BEE. And it's to be having that discussion about getting rid of racialized policies as a born free in the new South Africa 21 years later is ridiculous. And the fact that today we are talking about how it's not unusual for a fridge and a plasma TV to get stolen from a hospital is a scary place that we find ourselves in. But I think it just really speaks to the lack of respect for property generally in this country, and it starts at the top.
Yeah, no, that's exactly right. Right, let us move on to our last story today, and this is from the mouth of our own Mr. Marius Roodt. Marius, you wrote an article which was published on Media 24 recently. Can you tell us a little bit about what you were going on about, and just give us an overview of this issue?
Yeah, I was reacting to Natim Tetwa's complaints that the Olympics team wasn't representative enough, whatever that might mean. Just saying the government can complain about the national teams not being representative and not having enough people of the correct skin color in it, but the government needs to take a long, hard look at itself. You don't just Olympic athletes don't just fall out of the sky. It takes a lot of work to become an Olympic athlete. I believe Tatiana Schoonmaker is one of the only 2 medalists we got down to the recent Olympics. Tatiana Schoonmaker is 24. Her father in an interview said she's been training for the Olympics since she was 9. So it's not just something that happens. And yeah, you need and to become an Olympic athlete or to play sport to any kind of high level, you need to have coaching, you need to have access to facilities and so on. And the fact of the matter is the South African government doesn't supply that. I think out of the 30,000 schools, government schools in South Africa, only 1,000 have access to swimming. Only 500, I think, have access to a swimming pool. Only 25% of South African public schools even have a soccer pitch, and that's by far our most popular sport and easiest one to play in terms of equipment that you need. I think only about 1,000 schools have access to cricket fields and so on. And I mean, that's what you've got to do if you want to get a truly representative team. And at the same time, how well you do at the Olympics is there's a strong correlation between your how powerful your economy is and how well you do at the Olympics. One can look at a place like China. They used to be, used to get a handful of medals in Olympics. As the economy's grown, that's rocketed. They now always, I think they came second now in the Olympic table. And also the government has to concentrate on building sports. The Australian government is a very good example of that. They concentrated on building up their sports. In 1976, the Montreal Olympics, Australia only got something like 3 or 4 medals. So they established the Australian Institute of Sports. Now they're also an Olympic superpower. They do very well in other sports, cricket, rugby, soccer, hockey, and what have you. So if Natem Tetwa wants to complain about the representativity of the team, which also he shouldn't be if he's a member of a party which in theory talks about non-racialism, but we all know that the ANC forgot about non-racialism a very long time ago. That is where the government has to start. It needs to develop facilities for people. And at the same time, sport by itself is just playing sports is an end to itself. People to play sport you don't have to have that goal of playing for the Proteas or the Springboks or making the Olympic squad. If you want to play a sport, you should be able to. If you want to go have a place you can go kick a soccer ball around with your friends, then you should be able to. So just having sports facilities just for people who want to enjoy sport for the sake of itself, must be done for people and empowered. People need, if they want to go play cricket, there needs to be cricket facilities for them, rugby, whatever, wants to do athletics, whatever the case is. And the government simply doesn't do that. And we will never have, we will carry on being and also ran in the Olympics and even the sports that we do well in at the moment, rugby and cricket. If the government doesn't concentrate on the grassroots, then we'll also soon start seeing failures in those sports.
Alex, you're passionate about sport as well. I think let loose your frustration.
I don't think we have enough time for that, Nick. Yeah, I mean, I play a lot of sport myself, and it's you've been a part of school sport and development sport and coached a bit and stuff, so everyone knows what it's like. I mean, the thing that really is quite upsetting is how important sport is for young people, in terms of character growth, in terms of values, in terms of confidence. It really can be an outlet for a lot of people. And a lot of kids just don't have that opportunity. I mean, sure, if we have kids falling into pit latrines, but we want to try them jump over, bars and run on athletics tracks that don't exist. Like, what? No, like, it's just the cognitive dissonance with people like Ntetwa is frightening. And I think it's really sad because, I mean, I remember when we won the 2004 Olympic 400 men freestyle swimming gold, and that was incredible. I got goosebumps watching the welcome back for Tatiana Schoonmaker when she got back to the team hotel, and that's the things we want to celebrate. But anything the government says or tries to do just seems to make things worse at this stage, and it's really sad and it's frustrating. But, if we can get them out the way, maybe things will improve.
The government's the reverse King Midas,
Yes. That's a very good way of putting it. Anyway, that's all the time we have for the show today. So thank you very much for listening. Please support the Daily Friend and the Institute of Race Relations. Go to our website, irr.org.za/join to become a friend of the IRR. And also check out thedailyfriend.co.za if you don't already check it out. It's got great news, analysis, opinion. We host a variety of opinions out there, and it's always a good read. Often quite fun too. Anyway, we hope you enjoyed. We'll see you next week, and have a wonderful weekend, everyone. Cheers.